All right. Whenever we have the sound off, we're joined by the world's worst soccer fan. Cheers for nothing but
the Super Cup champions.
What?
I mean, the best team in Europe.
One win. Do you understand that when order is restored in the universe, because it will be, I'm going to dunk on you like this kid Zion at Duke dunks on the rest of college basketball.
Bring it.
All right. You have asked for punishment. I am all too happy to take requests.
Let's go.
All right. So there we go. We spoke to great guests today. Now we got to get to the calls. We got to get to the tweets. You can send those again using the hashtag #TheMMAHour and as well 844-866-2468. So Danny, we got to the tweets. Now it's time for the calls. You have filtered through the best.
Yes.
You have told me that we have finally some Title IX-esque gender representation.
We do.
Equal across the board.
We do.
So do we have a ladies first policy on today's show?
Sure. Let's go.
All right.
Ladies first.
You set it off, my friend.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the business and why the ratings are down.
Okay.
Hey, Luke and Danny. Jess here from Sydney in Australia. Loving the show and loving what you're putting out. I was thinking the other day with some of the fights being announced really close to the fight day. Do you think that has an impact on the pay-per-view buys and on the viewership on Fox? Like, could that be the reason why everything's so down? Like, I know a couple of years ago, they were announcing fights a lot further out from fight day, and so you can kind of have that time to build up and promote the card. Okay, love to hear your thoughts. I could be completely off. Bye.
So great call.
Yeah, actually, it was a pretty good question.
Yeah, and this is something that when we talk about why the numbers are down, we blame it on a bunch of different factors, and this is one that rarely gets brought up.
Right, and I think it's totally on the mark.
Yep.
Right, because it used to be that, number one, I don't know, maybe it's my imagination, but I don't remember the injury woes, pardon me, really getting, I mean, they were bad before, but they seem to get really bad around 2014 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And in any event, since then, they've gotten not much better, but we've got other mechanisms in play to deal with it. But you've got injury problems, plus now you've got this contract malaise where guys are like, I don't really want to sign. You've got UFC literally announcing fights before they're signed to pressure guys into signing, you know? So for me, it's just really weird. But I think absolutely if, like, you know a fight's going to happen 12 weeks out and it's reasonably big and there's media around it and you can anticipate it and you think about it, yeah, I think that does serve as a better anchor, Danny.
Yeah. I mean, Darren Till versus Tyron Woodley, I would say that's a pretty fantastic fight. And given who they are in the sport, especially with Till, you could make that a pretty big pay-per-view. But, man, how many weeks did they have since the fight was announced? I mean, the fight's happening, what, in 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, no, 2.5 weeks because I go on vacation for 2. So, by the way, people might say, what about Conor versus Habib? Yeah, what about Conor versus Habib? It's the exception that proves the rule, Danny, right? Because it's so big and so huge that it doesn't need the extra time. But for all the ones that aren't Conor versus Habib, you might need some extra time.
And let's look at boxing, like Canelo versus Triple G. That feels like it's been announced forever, and it's been on everyone's calendar for months.
Well,
like,
because of the delay, though, right?
Sure, also because of the delay, but even prior to that, like when it was announced, I think that fight was announced first than the Mayweather.
McGregor, yes,
McGregor.
And even though it aired 3 weeks afterwards, yeah.
And, you know, that's something that boxing does very well. It's like, all right, this fight's happening. Get it on your calendar. Wait for it now.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a good call. Great call. Yeah. Look at that, ladies. Huh? We take your calls, and we praise them when they're smart. I can't wait till we get the first dumb female caller, because I will dump on her as well. All right. Equal opportunist.
Let's hope we don't get to that.
All right.
Now, let's talk about Conor McGregor. A lot of questions surrounding him and his fight with...
I don't believe it.
Champ Habib. Yeah, right? Very strange.
Hey fellas, this is Zach from Brisbane, Australia. Loving the show.
Listen to the quality.
My question is just about McGregor Nurmagomedov. Most predictions on either side of the debate are picking a landslide, either a quick McGregor KO or a Nurmagomedov mauling. So my question is there any chance that you guys see this fight being a back and forth battle at all, or is it just going to be a landslide on either side? Cheers for all the content.
So
go first, Danny. What do you think?
This person didn't actually call, but actually dropped an audio file on our email, which you can do that. The MMA Hour at voxmedia.com. So if you can't call, if you don't have, you know, the money to pay international calling, you can always just send us audio to that email.
Okay.
But yeah, this was an interesting one because everybody I talked to, it's either McGregor's going to get a quick KO or Nurmagomedov is going to, just destroy him and it's going to be very dominant. But is there a chance this can possibly be a back and forth and maybe we go to a split decision or something like that?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Always remember something. 538 is a site run by this guy named Nate Silver who deals in probabilities. And he took a lot of, this guy named Sam Wong out of Princeton took more shit for the last election predictions. But the point being is, if you see something like, let's say X fighter has an 84% probability to win, Danny, that doesn't mean that they necessarily win 84%. How do I explain this? That doesn't mean that when they go in there, it's like a guarantee.
Times.
Well, 84 times out of 100, yes, but that's not what I'm trying to say. People think that like if you have a 90% chance of winning, that not only do you win, but you win in like a landslide or something. But that's really not what it means exactly. So like whatever the probabilities are, and by the way, they're close if you look at just the odds makers. It's not even that. But that doesn't tell you that it couldn't be a landslide. Conor could go in there and wipe him out in 13 seconds again. Or Habib, over the course of 2 rounds, could maul him and then submit him. It can go a lot of different ways. So whenever you look at odds, whenever you look at probabilities, always be careful. That's not necessarily a reflection, at least if we're talking about percentages, that's not necessarily a reflection of how the fight might look. Now, he's asking a bit of a different question, this caller. Here's my point. Sure, let's say Habib goes in there, closes the distance, no problem, and it absolutely goes to work on Conor McGregor. Would that shock anybody in the first round? No. Right, Danny? Then you go to the second round. What if Conor lands a big shot on him, and now Habib is fighting for his life, and he nearly gets stopped? Then you come out in the third round, and Habib restores order. Then you go back in the fourth round, he takes another shot. This has happened all the time. Or how about this? Habib beats the crap out of him for 3 rounds, and then he gets tired. Somehow Conor does it. You could say, well, that wouldn't happen. Keep saying shit can't happen in mixed martial arts, and it always does. It always does. So for me, I do think that in the end, it'll be a finish one way or the other, and it'll be decisive one way or the other, at least the very ending. But could it be back and forth? 1,000%.
I have a feeling this is going to look a lot like the Chad Mendes-McGregor fight. Because, man, McGregor's takedown defense is looking good, man. Against Eddie Alvarez, solid wrestler. He didn't really give him the opportunity to shoot on him. And, even against Chad Mendes, he was doing some things on the ground that, let you know that he's very aware of fighting.
He didn't use his guard, but he used his timing really well. Yeah. When do I find just the right moment to explode, right? His timing in offense, generally, McGregor's, is superb.
And he's got good hips from the bottom. Like he's good at shrimping and always staying at an angle, just not flat on his back.
Right, but here's the other X factor, of course, is if Conor gets tired, he just becomes a shell of himself. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
But I would not be surprised if it's a back and forth.
Yeah, of course.
Sum it up. Cool. Now let's keep the McGregor train rolling.
All right.
Hi, Luke. This is Jim calling from Chicago, Illinois. I don't want exclusivity, but I do want priority. Dana White has said recently he has no interest in GSP fighting the winner of Khabib versus Conor. If Conor wins, despite Dana's current stance, do you think that GSP versus fight the UFC will try to make? Conor has a history of only punching up and not down. Even though Ferguson, Diaz, and Woodley would be huge fights, none of them would bring in nearly as many pay-per-view buys as Conor versus GSP. Let me know your thoughts. Love the show.
I think, and this is something that didn't get brought up to me until we were on air on the MMA Beat.
Yeah.
I think it was after the Beat.
Yeah.
Because for me, I've just been contemplating, getting there. What's the build-up going to look like? I've never really thought about post-UFC 229.
Right.
Dude, if McGregor wins, how is the GSP fight not happening?
And more than that, think about it just this way, right? McGregor wins. Let's say he wins in spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
Another, second round TKO, let's say it's just like the Alvarez fight, all right? You just brutalized. And this is why I want to give Conor credit. People are like, what if Habib is overrated? Habib's not overrated. If Conor stops him in the second round, that is as legit an MMA win as they could possibly come. Understand that. So let's say he does that. To me, it's not even about that, right? Conor wins, gets out, goes to the presser. Boom. What does he say? He says, I want GSP. Someone calls up GSP and his management. They say, what do you want? He says, I want Conor. If those two actors together say they want it, who is going to say no to this? Who is going to say, now maybe they make it non-title or at 160 or something. Maybe they find a way around that. But for sure, if both actors come out and say they want it, it's a done deal.
Yeah, that if Conor wins and GSP has already shown interest,
Yeah.
and you can tell Conor, he's always looking, as I said, Conor's not a king. He's a conqueror. He's always looking to get the next step.
Right.
The next step has to be GSP. So if Conor wins, that fight's happening for sure.
Now, if Habib wins, I don't know. I think it's actually different.
Yeah.
Because I think Habib just kind of wants to stay as a title holder at 155. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he does want to face St-Pierre, but he's not quite the atmosphere chaser that McGregor is. I'm not passing judgment on him. I'm just saying they have different priorities. I actually think the chance of a Habib GSP fight, I don't know. Conor versus GSP, if Conor wins, enormous.
Oh, for sure. All right, now let's talk about McGregor. If he wins,
All right.
what happens?
All right.
Hello, Danny Segura and Luke Thomas. This is Donk from Connecticut.
Creepy.
I have rooted for Conor McGregor every fight he's had, but I wouldn't consider myself a Conor fan. I always looked at it as like I was rooting for MMA. Every fight he would win would bring more eyes to the sport. But at this point, do you think he's brought as much attention to UFC as he could, and the win is actually bad for MMA at this point? Curious to hear your thoughts.
So that is a fantastic question.
We're getting better and better questions these days.
Yeah.
You notice that?
Yeah. Is at this point, like, let's be honest, Ronda Rousey winning, Conor McGregor winning is good. It's a healthy thing for the industry of MMA.
I thought about this, yeah.
You've talked about it before. You probably wouldn't have your job if it wasn't for Brock Lesnar when he made the sport hot.
I
Like
absolutely
back in the
believe
day.
that. Yep.
Well, I probably wouldn't have my job if it wasn't for Ronda Rousey because I got hired around that time when everything was popping. But if McGregor wins at this point, given the fact that we know he can't tie up a division, the belt doesn't get defended, the chaos that causes at 155, all that, then there might be interim titles in place. Everything that comes with McGregor winning are the consequences of that worth? Like, is McGregor winning at this point good for the sport? Does he still bring the same attention? I mean, or the attention that he already brought is probably the attention we're going to get.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I'm actually, I've thought long and hard about this one. And I certainly don't know if I have the right answer. But my general sense about this, Danny, is that I'm glad that those guys did what they did on their rise. But then that was incredibly valuable for MMA. Rousey, Lesnar, Jones to an extent, right? When Jones was ballooning up. And even still, when that Jones-Cormier fight, the rematch was a big deal, right? So to me, I've often said this, the most exciting time in a fighter's career is when they're on that rise. In boxing, it's a little bit less true. It's once they become kind of kings that matters more. I'm not really sure why exactly that's the case, but to answer the question, my basic belief is that it probably would be good for MMA if Conor wins, but it's hard to say if he's even going to stick around. So what's the real value there if he wins? It's fairly fleeting. And more to the point, look, man, this is not – I know Tom Lawler called it like they're more like stuntmen, and I certainly appreciate that perspective, but these are not scripted outcomes. Like whoever's going to win is whoever is going to win. And these guys are facing the very best of their generation, the very best of their weight class. At some point, if the sport can't sustain itself through its own designed mechanism, which is we don't know the results, then it doesn't deserve to, right? It is nice to have what you talked about, these periods of explosive growth that shower everyone. Like, here's the truth, man. When Conor retires, I sort of wonder what's going to happen to the Irish MMA scene, and I wonder what's going to happen about the number of jobs, frankly, in Irish MMA media. I suspect it's going to shrink considerably. I could be totally wrong about that, but that's sort of my hunch about things. And certainly when he goes, that's going to have an effect in MMA. It's going to have an effect in MMA in America, much less overseas. So it's like, I'm not saying there's not good outcomes to be had when a very popular figure does well, but if a guy like that can't sustain himself in a sport where that is what is ultimately what we're trying to decide, then that's just the way it is. That's my look anyway.
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of gray areas. You can't say if McGregor wins, it's bad for the sport or good. I think there comes, some consequences and some pros as well.
It's a mixed bag, right?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, and it kind of depends on what kind of bag you want to get, right? I think if Conor McGregor loses, at least you can you can keep in mind that there will be some order restored because, as you mentioned, Habib is willing to defend the title against anybody. He just wants to be champion, and there's certainly value to that. And not only that, but it brings the lightweight division, a breath of fresh air, and it should make it a lot healthier. But man, those numbers that Conor McGregor draws are something else, and that's also very beneficial. And there's a trickle down effect to that too.
As a general rule, here's what I would say. Has Conor McGregor been good for MMA generally? There's no doubt. Yeah. There's no argument. There's no contrary to that. The answer is yes. Fact.
I would agree with that for sure.
Good. Glad you did.
Let's talk about Bellator. Right. One of the very few things we agree on. Let's talk about Bellator now. And this is a really good question.
Hi, this is David calling from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Question about our good Canadian friend Rory MacDonald. If Rory beats Gegard and wins the Bellator Grand Prix, will he be universally regarded by the MMA world as the best active welterweight? And would this be the very first time that Bellator has a champion that is universally regarded as superior to the UFC's? And knowing all this, do you think the UFC regrets their decision not to re-sign Rory as he looks to become the face of Bellator?
So I'm going to cut it right there.
That's an interesting question, too.
But yeah, man, if he beats Gegard Mousasi, knowing what we know about him, right? And then if he goes on and clears that welterweight Grand Prix, which is looking pretty stacked, is Rory all of a sudden in the GOAT conversations?
Boy. Well, that's not the same question he asked. Wasn't his question, wouldn't he be regarded as the consensus best welterweight?
The welterweight. Yeah, the welterweight GOAT.
Yeah. Well, not even the welterweight GOAT, because the GOAT's the greatest of all time. That's George St-Pierre at welterweight. Right? So, I mean, like, who's the best welterweight right now? I don't know how you say no to that. That's a great point. But I would say this about the tournament. Rory does not have an easy path no matter what, right? Because he's facing Mousasi. Then he's got to face Fitch. Fitch is, I don't know that he would be the higher-ranked guy in the tournament. And then he has to face the winner of Ruth versus Gracie. The big X factor there for me, Danny, is how good is Ed Ruth? Is he the next big thing in MMA, which he might be? Or is he just not ready for a guy of Rory's stature? We don't really know yet. And then on the other side, he's got a guy in Lima who he beat. He's got a guy in Daly who he beat, or MVP, or Koreshkov. So I certainly see Rory as the best guy in that tournament. But the winning of that tournament, plus beating maybe the best middleweight out there, yeah, that might do it. That might honestly do it. And it also depends on what happens with Tyron Woodley in September, right? Does he beat Darren Till? And if he does, how does he look doing it?
Yeah.
It's a couple of interesting things have to happen, but I would say generally, is it possible? And not only not possible in some kind of like crazy theoretical sense. Is this a real contingency that we should prepare for? Yes, it is.
For sure. And I think the second part to that was, do you think the UFC made a mistake in letting him go? Because for a while, it felt like the UFC was letting go these guys that felt like they were close to done, right? And then, Rory was coming off, a bad nose injury, and he had a pretty bad loss against Stephen Thompson. But, man, if he manages to beat Gegard and clear out that welterweight Grand Prix, did they get it wrong?
That's a tough one to answer, right? And here's why. It's because what is one criticism you and I have had about UFC all these many years, which is, yes, it's where the best fight the best. It's also where the best can't get tune-up fights.
Yeah.
And it looked to me pretty clearly that what he needed was a break, and what he needed were fights that could get him back on his feet. And that's exactly what he got in Bellator, like to the letter. He didn't face any chumps. He fought good guys, but he fought good guys in a way where he could use his existing skill sets to get around, certainly in the Daly case, without too much damage. Now, the Lima fight, he got beat up a little bit more, but you just don't really get that in the UFC. So, like, people will say it was a mistake to let a guy like that go. Well, in the sense that UFC could provide more of a platform for guys to get back on their feet, yes. But it's not a mistake if you're the UFC and you realize we're not going to give this guy any fights to get back on his feet, which means that this crushing grind of our type of fighting and schedule is only going to grind him further. Well, in that sense, it actually does, make sense that they let him go.
Yeah, I think he could have gotten guys of the level of Daly within the UFC, and given the fact that George St-Pierre.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. Do you think they would? When you say he could have gotten one, I agree. What I'm saying is, and maybe you think differently than me. Do you think the UFC would have matched him up that way?
You know, I think depending, because you don't know how their relationship is, but if they were, both parties were content with each other, I think they could have, yeah. And, you know, given the fact that Rory's still young and he's huge for that, you know, Canadian market, and not only that, but he has a win over Tyron Woodley. Like, you could have played that second fight up, you know, into a bigger deal. And just given Rory's stature within the UFC, he was a guy that was a prospect. He's a guy that's well known. He's a guy who's also been in crazy wars, and fans remember him for that. I think ultimately, if Rory proves out to be, you know, what we all think, one of the best welterweights out there, it's probably a mistake for letting him go.
Okay, what's next?
All right, now let's talk about UFC Lincoln and the main event that's going to happen in that card.
All right.
Hey, Luke, it's Adrian from Corpus Christi again. I really appreciate you taking my call last time. That was awesome. Oh, my God, I've become a superstar here in Corpus because of y'all.
Why is he calling from a wind
changed
tunnel?
My whole life. My question is Justin Gaethje, James Vick. Justin Gaethje, man, how much is he really worth? If he loses his next fight, did the UFC just get everything they could out of Gaethje already? He's very, very exciting, but, I mean, how long can he keep losing? You know? How long can they keep giving us that same performance of the very exciting guy, but just doesn't come close in the end? Thanks.
Yeah, I've thought about this one too, man.
And I feel like not too many people are thinking about this, right? Because it
3 fights in a row, and if he loses, like, he doesn't lose decisions. He goes out on his shield. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, yeah, like, people are just contemplating, oh, he's such a fantastic fighter. Oh, what a war. But, man, if he loses this, it'll be 3 in a row. Where does that put him? I mean, and not only that, but, like, really bad, like, really crazy wars and really bad finishes, too.
Man, if he lost this one, let's say he loses first of all, let's be clear. He might win. He might win in spectacular fashion.
There's a good chance he might win.
Right. I mean, he is not out of this fight by any stretch of the imagination. But let's say that for hypothetical purposes, he does lose. What does this do? Boy, it puts him in a bad place. That's a real bad place it puts him. Now, it certainly puts him as somebody who would be a fan favorite that you could rely upon. But this is what I mean about that grind. It's like you have to ask yourself, is the UFC really the best place for a guy like Justin Gaethje? If he goes out there and he wins on Saturday, you can say, sure. He'll win some, he'll lose some, but he's definitely competitive enough to stay in this space. But like the reality is, they're just going to give him a series of murderers. He's only going to be fighting serial killers. That's it. Guys like James Vick, guys like Dustin Poirier, guys like Eddie Alvarez, and frankly, even Michael Johnson gave him the business before, you know, things didn't go his way, but he knocked down, I mean, he came very close to beating Justin Gaethje. So you have to just ask yourself, like, is a guy with that kind of fighting style, is this really the best place for him? Because here's the truth. The only matchups he's really going to get, the kinds that get the fans all worked up, are the kinds where he's going to get abused. He might win, he might lose, but you've seen it, man. He doesn't get out of these fights without taking a substantial amount of abuse. And so you lose 3 in a row, now you got to just wonder, like, how much more of this is there viable for a promotional entity? Because do people really want to see him fight, like, people outside the top 15, even though they might be very... And by the way, guys outside the top 15, they're pretty good.
Especially at lightweight, hell yeah.
They're pretty good fighters. So that would be a really bad spot. It's a big win for him. It's not like 3 losses in a row, oh, will he get cut? That's not the issue. The issue is, if you lose 3 in a row, now where are you in a division where they can maximize what you do for them? It makes the most sense if you can just win enough to stay in that orbit. Once you lose that space, it's a different equation.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's exactly a do or die, but man, it definitely changes career paths, right?
Yes.
It's like, take left or right here. And if he loses to James Vick, especially if he gets finished, can the UFC still go back to that well and just, you know, pull the same card and just keep putting him in exciting fights? Until what point are fans going to be like, look, I don't want to watch this anymore?
Yeah, no, I think they still want to watch him, but if he's getting abused by guys outside the top 15, because by the way, all this abuse is cumulative.
Yeah.
Right? Or cumulative, I should say. Then, you know, it's going to get easier and easier for the guys outside of that orbit to get their hands on him. So, you know, Justin Gaethje has his work cut out for him here. By the way, I asked Paul Felder about that. Where are you on this one? Where he needs to incorporate wrestling because he is, by the way, he's a very good wrestler and he could really add some safety to his game. And I bet, but by the way, savage ground and pound. Or B, he's been fighting this way for so long that adding wrestling will actually throw him off of his game. Where are you on that one?
You know, I would always like to see him wrestle just because he has really good wrestling credentials. And the few times that he's shown, I've been following since WSOF.
Yeah.
The few times that he has shown wrestling, it's pretty good. So I would like to use him. I would like to see him use his wrestling just to be a little smarter in his fights. But man, if that's his brand, that's who he is. You know, you can't change a guy. I do think there's a path to victory without wrestling. I think Vic backs up a lot in a straight line, and he keeps his chin up, and he's very tall as well. And that'll leave Gagey a lot of room to, you know, throw powerful hooks. And, you know, from my understanding, Vic has been finished before, right?
He has, yeah. I think Beneil Dariush did it.
Yes. So, you know, there's that. Something that I didn't think of, which Paul Felder brought up, is the leg kicks.
Yep.
Gagey's got brutal leg kicks.
Maybe the best in the division.
Yep, and that guy's tall, has long legs, and, you know, that could definitely be a factor.
It's going to be a fun fight.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's get some more of these calls because these donks left them.
Let's talk about Demetrius Johnson.
All right.
Hey, Luke. This is Edgar from Houston, Texas. I have a quick question for you. Do you think we've seen the last of champion DJ by his own choice? I'm thinking maybe he got tired of being champion. Maybe he doesn't want it anymore. Every time he fought, there were only two stories that would revolve around him. One, why are your numbers awful? Two, when are you going to fight TJ? All nonstop. I'm thinking now he's able to sit back, play on Twitch, spend time with his family, heal up. Maybe he doesn't need it anymore. He's already 1-1 with the current champ. His win over Cejudo was more convincing. He's already mentioned he doesn't want to fight TJ. Let me know what you think. All right, thank you so much. Sorry for rambling. Bye.
Yes, he's a liar, this gentleman, Edgar from Houston, Texas. He promised us a short question.
Yeah, 46 seconds, man.
Mentiras.
Yep.
Okay, boy, that's a great question. I would still say competitively, there's no doubt in my mind he would like to get his belt back. I bet he thinks he can beat Cejudo if they fought a third time. By the way, you could have easily scored that fight for him, so it's not some crazy idea at all. So I think that the competitor in him absolutely wants to maximize what he can do. I will say something that, you know what? I mentioned this before. I'm not going to say who it was, Danny. Somebody in the UFC once told me something, and the first time they told me this, it was a very high-ranking person. The first time they told me this, I thought it was them trying to cover for low wages. Here's what he told me. He goes, it was better when we could pay guys I'm paraphrasing. It was better when we could pay guys very little because they would fight more often. And we wanted to, when you start giving out big checks, they don't fight as much. And at first I was like, well, that's a really ghoulish thing to say. But dude, there's kind of something to it. I'm sorry, there just is. You look around, you got, I guess they're going to sign here Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman, but you heard Luke Rockhold being like, I'm not going to get back in there unless it's the right deal. And it's like, he's like, I've got all these businesses going on outside MMA. Do I need to say anything about the Diaz brothers? GSP did a long career and took a hiatus, but nevertheless, you look at that. Look at Conor McGregor taking time off. You see it all the time. Guys who get money outside of the cage, they take a couple big paychecks, and Demetrius has, obviously been around and put his work in, but I'm just saying, they start to get outs, they start to take them. That is not nearly the same case in boxing, where once they get to high earning potential, they try to stay in that orbit as long as possible. I'm not saying I agree with the UFC's logic exactly, as this person related to me. What I am saying is, yeah, we grind these fuckers into sand, so when they don't have to be ground anymore, they kind of choose to not be in that position anymore.
Yeah.
Right or wrong?
No, right. And even within fighting, we see it. They don't have to get a check elsewhere. Like, look at Nate Diaz. This was a guy that we knew him. His whole brand was, I'll fight anybody, anywhere, and he'll show up and scrap anyone. Yeah, for sure. All of a sudden, he gets, that big money check from Conor McGregor or the Conor McGregor fight, and all of a sudden, he's like, yo, I'm not picking up the phone until there's $20 million on the line. So there's definitely some truth to that. I would like to address something he mentioned, which is something that I found very interesting. Okay. Have you noticed that a lot of champions, and this is not true for everyone, but they look relieved once they lose the belt? I mean, GSP when he wanted to leave.
Great
Anderson
point.
Silva when he lost to Chris Weidman. And certainly Demetrius Johnson. I mean, I'm sure he was sad, and part of him was. Sure. But he wasn't devastated. He wasn't Daniel Cormier crying, after the loss. He was, in some ways, he kind of felt like, okay, now I don't have this thing. Now I don't have anybody asking me, when's your next fight? Now I don't have a duty to be constantly defending this.
And think about it, too. Like, if you're Henry Cejudo, he won the Olympic champion. He won the Olympics, 10 years ago? Oh, I think yesterday. Was the 10-year anniversary of the Beijing Games where he won. Now, think about that. You win that Olympic champion. You have that title for life, But the next Olympic cycle, you're just another donk in the tournament. You don't have to answer for anybody. You might have to do extra media because of who you are, but you don't have nearly the same pressures. Oh, can he repeat? I'm not saying there are no pressures once you win a title. It does change things. But the point being is the Warriors won the last NBA championship. I recognize the NBA is stacked in their favor at this point, but they don't enter the season as the champs. Someone else has to claim it. Rather than once you win the title, dude, I mean, heavy it lies the crown. Wow, it is such a responsibility, so many questions, so much extra media, so much extra weight on your performance. You have to face the very best guys typically all the time. Yeah, I do think you're right. I do think they're sad when they lose, but Jesus Christ, you don't have to worry about all that grind anymore.
Yeah.
Five round fights all the time, you know?
Yeah. And they also have a clock. Like, you know, let's say if a top 5 fighter wants to take a break, he can take a break. I mean, he might lose his spot, but he can take a break. A champion can't just go, hey, look, I'm taking a vacation. Because then everybody starts going, hey, you got to defend or vacate, you know?
Well, you know, Conor had a couple months off.
Well, Conor is the exception to everything.
Yeah, I know.
So, yeah. We got time for one more?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to intervene in this one, so let's just play it and then I'll hop
Is this a person who's treating the bottom half of their body like an amusement park?
No,
At a Greyhound bus
not
station?
this one. No,
All right.
no. We've had those, but don't worry, I got those out of the way.
All right.
Yeah.
This is Kyle from Houston. Luke, I want you to pick one of the two. The UFC drops 50% of its current fights, meaning fight cards, but keeps the Face the Pain and your Woo fans, or the UFC keeps its current amount of fight cards, but Real Madrid never wins a Champions League again. Which would you
All right.
choose? Thanks.
Let me hop in real quick because
Kind of botched the setup.
he did. So, how about this? No Face the Pain, no more Woos. 50% I think is too much.
Yeah.
So let's say, I don't know, like 15, 20% of the cards.
Sure.
So, you know, 15, 20% of the cards off, no Face the Pain, no Woos. Would you rather take that or have Real Madrid never win a cup again?
Well, this is an easy choice because even you botched the deal. You mean to tell me I get less oversaturation and I don't have to listen to Face the Pain? Is that the offer here?
That's the offer.
I'll take
But
that.
the counter of that is Real not winning anything ever again.
Oh, I see. Well, you know what? I can always wear earplugs.
You can always switch to Atletico.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I'd rather die.
I think I got an extra joke.
I'd legit rather die. I'd rather die in Thai prison like some of those guys in Prayer Before Dawn. No. I would take the wooing and just wear earplugs. Look, I've already hate humanity and I'm 39, right? Like, what's going to change? I'm going to stop hating humanity? No, I'm a misanthrope through and through. So just let the donkeys moan and do their primate mating call. It's the white trash primate mating call. Let them do it. And I can still mock them and get followers on social media through my, coastal elite snobbery. And life will continue as normal. And Real will continue to be the dominant force in Europe that it has been the last decade.
Sure, we'll see about that. Part of me actually thinks you enjoy Face the Pain and the Woos. In a way you like to hate on.
To be honest, I have a little bit of fun hating on the Woos. I'm actually tired of hating on Face the Pain. Somebody shouts to this YouTube channel called MMA On Point. They made a video about why Face the Pain needs to be thrown away. And every time there is somebody out there with calloused knuckles from dragging them across the floor who comes out and goes, I like Face the Pain. And I just think to myself, how is it I have to, imagine going to a restaurant where all they served was feces soufflés, and I had to convince you to not eat there. How is that possible that in the year of our Lord 2018, I have to get out there and make an argument that this is something we need to move on? It's so dated. It's not even like a band and a song that did really well independent of its UFC involvement in that era. Name another STEM song. I can't. Can you name another Limp Bizkit song? You could probably name maybe a handful, right? Yeah. Break Stuff, Rollin', Nookie, right? These are all uniformly bad, but they had some success. We're not even doing that. Do you mean to tell me they've got Everlast in Dana White's back pocket? They can't have Jump Around? Everybody loves Jump Around. I love Jump Around. Do you love Jump Around?
Yep.
Well, what are we doing?
Who doesn't?
Apparently the UFC, because they keep doing Face the Pain. We are destined to learn the hard way.
And you made a great point a while ago. Not only is it a terrible song, but it says something about the UFC brand. Like if like somebody that's like 17 or 18 listens to that, dude, that's like so 2010. Like that's almost a
2010.
decade
That's
ago.
2003.
Or 2008 or something like that. Like whenever the first UFC video game came out, like the better one, I guess. Like, yeah, what is that? Like, that just sounds whack. It sounds lame, to be honest. Like I don't know if you remember. I think it was for the second Conor McGregor fight. They put the promo and Nate Diaz came out and there was a Drake song. And I'm not the biggest fan of Drake, but it made sense. It felt fresh. That's what they need.
Yeah.
They need to rebrand. They need to switch the music.
They need to refresh it up. And people are like, well, what song would you pick? And I'm like, Dead Air. The sound of an animal being skinned alive. Armpit fart noises for 45 minutes. I mean, literally anything is better than that. The poverty of imagination on this one really is amazing.